Deb, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you on.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you. I know our mutual friend Brian had connected us, and I always love you. One of the things I've been doing this podcast for over 8 years now. It's like when I look at someone's background, because you can see at surface level, like, oh, you're at Meta, and this and that, and then you start like digging in, and you see all these like idiosyncrasies and these different things people do, and it's kind of fun. So I'm excited to chat around a lot of that. For folks that don't know you, like how do you introduce yourself at a cocktail party if you went tonight? Like what's the 30-second pitch you'd give?
So I usually say, hi, I'm Deb Liu, and I work in tech. And so I keep it generic.
Is there a response people say after that? Like, is there a follow-up question you typically hear?
Typically people want to know like what area, what have you built? And so, most recently I started a startup. Before I was at fairly large, brand name companies. And so it's a little bit different now starting with something that people haven't heard of, but it is pretty exciting to start from, ground zero at a time when, so much is possible with tech.
Yeah. Did you always want to start your own company, or was this kind of a new endeavor that you picked up recently?
Well, so I joined, when I joined PayPal, it was like 300 people in Mountain View. When I joined Facebook, it was like 900 people. And when I left, it was over 60,000. And so, it's a pretty big change. And then I joined as CEO of Ancestry and spent 4 years there, a really amazing company, and had a wonderful time. But then I took some time off. I had cancer. My mom had just passed. It was just a tough time. And then I took some time off. But, I wanted to the AI revolution just came like a freight train. I was there for the internet revolution. I was there for cloud. I was there for mobile. And it just felt like I couldn't sit out the AI revolution right now. And so super exciting to actually be a part of something where the change is not happening in years or months, it's happening in weeks. And it's just been such a crazy adventure to see what is possible with AI today.
I guess I'll ask you. I want to jump in the rapid fire in a second, but while we're on topic, obviously with your background from like the tech standpoint, engineering and stuff, have you seen like the AI sort of revolution coming in past years?
So, we had actually managed a machine learning. You could see the gains coming from machine learning. You could see, really basic AI, but generative AI just came so suddenly. It was 20 years. It was basically for 20 years. It was like 2 years out for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
And then it was like yesterday. And
Yeah.
now it has unlocked so much. And so I had seen how, machine learning could really optimize and build. But now with the complexity of the models that are out there, it is amazing what you can see if you can harness those gains for companies, for teams, for workflows. What wasn't possible before is absolutely possible today.
Oh yeah. I mean, even myself, who's like not a developer or anything, like I'm building like this app on the side right now, and just like how I can do that just by talking, right, and
Yeah.
working through it. It's just amazing, and that's we're 2026. Imagine 2030, where
Yes.
that's going to be, right? It's pretty amazing. All right, I'm gonna put a pin in that because I want to get back to AI a little bit more and kind of what you're doing. Let's do rapid fire. All right, you ready for this?
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's see what we get today. All right, what's your go-to mantra or reminder when things get hard?
Mm. The only way to get, well, let me see. How do I say it? The only way forward is through.
The only way forward is through. And that's a kind of an action thing. You have to take action when you run up against the wall, basically.
Yes, absolutely. I just feel like often, you hit the valley of despair, and what do? You sit down and do nothing, or you just keep moving. And I think that, it's if you keep moving forward, momentum will take you there.
Do you remember a time in your life when you battled that idea and maybe you sat back in the seat, you didn't go forward?
Well, I was really stuck in my career, and I share a lot about this when I was having kids. So I have 3 kids, and I had them all in 5 years. The pregnancies, breastfeeding, everything. It was just my career completely stalled out. And I thought about leaving tech because it was hard, right? It was just, you show up every day, you have kids at home, there's a lot of demands on your time. And you just feel like, I remember this woman I talked to who later, she said to me, I feel like I'm failing at home and I'm failing at work. At least if I quit my job, I will just be failing in one place. And I was
Yeah.
like, don't leave. But I had actually gone through it, and I said, no, you just have to get through this. And I actually resigned my job at PayPal. I said, "Hey, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore." My the VP I resigned to, he was like, "Actually, give me a chance to find you a job that's going to fit with what you want." And within a week, he found me the opportunity to lead the buyer experience at eBay. And like when you have a job that you're excited about,
Yeah.
then it changes your perspective completely. And so for me, that was a really key moment where somebody really changed my perspective and brought me back to the industry. I think that happens a lot though. It's like you feel like you get stuck, and the question is, do you get off the train or do you just keep riding and trying to get through?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's something kind of similar I've heard recently, which I like, is like if you're lost or stuck, keep moving. Kind of a similar thing. It's like if you just stay still, you're gonna you're kind of ruminate all of it, that everything's bad, right?
Yes.
Instead of just moving forward and then seeing
Yes.
what happens. So I love that. That's a great story too about leadership, right? And being able to help someone. All right. What's the mental checklist you run through before saying yes to something?
Mm. I used to be so bad. Actually, I had a friend who wrote an article on my blog saying that you need to say no more because she's like, "That's my advice to you." And so for me, it's, is this worth the trade? I think often it's easier to say yes than to think about the opportunity cost. And for me, it's, what is this the thing that's the most important thing for me to do at this moment to say yes to this? And I think often we say yes because of the discomfort of saying no, but a clean no is better than a messy yes, where you have to reshuffle everything, where you might be able to make it, you aren't sure, and suddenly it becomes this mental load. Just saying, "Hey, this isn't going to work. I'm sorry," is so much cleaner.
So you're saying even if it's like 3 months in advance, if in the moment you're like, that doesn't feel right, you're given a heck no.
Yeah, I think more people need to say clean nose and put it out of your mind. I think often we put a maybe, which actually now it's in the back of your mind for 3 months as you're
Yeah.
thinking, well, can I fit this in? Should I? How do I follow up? And instead just say, hey, this isn't working right now, and there's opportunities to say yes in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. All right. Number 3, how do you keep yourself motivated when the wins are slow to come? Maybe this relates to your new startup, right? As you're kind of working through it.
Well, I think that it's somebody said that I was talking to another founder who recently started a company last year, and he said he's like, my emotion. He's like, it used to be your roller coaster days. We used to work together at PayPal, and he said, it used to be the roller coaster is over weeks, but as a founder, it's like over days and
Yeah.
sometimes over hours. Right?
Yeah.
Like every day is like you're winning, you're losing. And he said the roller coaster is happening all the time. And the ability to regulate your emotions and just keep moving forward is the most important thing. Because I think that, there are going to be wins and then there are people who say no. And you just have to keep going.
Yeah. And I guess I'll ask maybe just from your background, especially maybe learning things at these big organizations and what have you, like how do you try to stay organized on the day to keep your eye on the prize and not get distracted from, some of these other things, even from the yes and no we talked about in the prior question?
So I have this rule, which is called the future you rule. What is the future you wish you did today? If you said yes to an event that you have to go to tonight, what did that person think when the previous you, your past you said yes 3 months ago, right? If the answer is not my future me is enthusiastically yes, then the answer is no.
Well, I appreciate you saying yes to this podcast. So that's good. That's all right. Here we go. Number 4. What's one thing you had to unlearn to grow?
Hmm. I think the biggest thing was, I was an introvert. So I grew up as an introvert. I grew up in a small town in the deep South where the state of South Carolina, where there's less than 1% of people are Asian. And so very few people had ever even met somebody who looked like me. We were the one Asian family in town, by the way. And, you think about that. I just, I was extremely introverted and I was like, that's just who I am. And I think that that was a very fixed mindset. And I had that mindset for a long, long time. But then when I realized that that doesn't have to be that way, I had to unlearn. And I have a lot of people come to me and say, well, you're comfortable speaking on stage, you do these podcasts, you do all these talks, but I'm introverted. And I'm like, well, why do we treat introversion as not, it's like saying, well, I only know English. I'm
Yeah.
not bilingual. Well, you never learned it, right? And I think that, extroversion and speaking up is a skill that you can learn. And if you can invest in that skill, you can grow.
Yeah. I agree. I'm kind of the same way. Like a lot of people think I'm extroverted because I do this podcast, and I'm like, no, I need like the small group. But I guess thinking about it, I've probably used it more as like a handicap, if you will, for lack of a better vocabulary, saying it right, as like this is a negative instead of saying no. What's the positives out of it? And to your point, how do you learn to build that on that skill, like build something different? So, do you find that like is there any particular technique you use to help you overcome that?
Well, so, okay, if I say, okay, I'm introverted, I'm just not going to speak at this meeting, right? I have a friend, Carol Izazaki. She has this thing she calls unintentional, ridiculous strategies we employ. So imagine you're going to a meeting. Before you walk in, you tell yourself, I'm going to add no value at this meeting.
Yeah.
Or you walk in the meeting, you say, I'm just going to sit in the back and take notes. Or you say, I'm not going to share my ideas. And she said, that would sound like a ridiculous strategy, but how many times do you walk out of a meeting having done just that? Right. And so she's like, so the technique is intentionality. Before you walk in, what do you hope to accomplish? If you don't hope to accomplish anything, why are you even there? And so it's like, if you want to just listen in, now they have great note takers. You could just read the notes, right? And so I think often we don't walk in with intention, and thus we don't get the outcome that we want. Instead, axing this unintentional, ridiculous strategy, and instead going in and saying, in this meeting, I want to share this idea and hope to get support for it. Yeah. Just write it down. Like it takes 5 seconds before you walk in, and then grade yourself. Did you do it? Did you accomplish it?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's because then you're more like top of mind when you actually walk in there. That you may or may not do it, but at least you're thinking about it after. Like, damn, I didn't do it next time. I have to. So that's really good. All right, last one here. Let's dig in the pot here. What's one risk you're glad you took?
I remember when I was graduating from Stanford, I really wanted to go back to North Carolina, and we basically decided to stay because I got a job at PayPal, and it was kind of sudden, and we couldn't find jobs. And I just took this job in tech thinking, well, I'll just do this for a year. What's the worst that can happen, right? Yeah. And so I took a job, had no idea what I was doing. I interviewed for the job out not even knowing what a product manager was. And it has completely changed my life. And I think, during the meetings, they would just say, during the interviews, they would ask me all these questions, like, what would you build? But as a customer, I used the products a lot. And so I was an eBay power seller. I had, bought and sold quite a bit on the site. So I had all of these ideas. And then they said, okay, congratulations, you have the job. And I had to admit to them, I have no idea what this job is. Like, what were you actually? So I showed up to work and I had to ask the VP, like, Amy, what is the actual job? And she said, all those ideas you had, you go build it. And I'm like, how? And so, but I think, you fake it till you make it, I guess. Like they hire smart people and train them, which I appreciate. It was a huge risk to do something I had no idea whether I would be good at it, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow. What was and remind me the period at PayPal, like where was this in the company's history when you were there?
So it was right after the company had gone public. It was 300 people in Mountain View. I think there were some people in Omaha. And so I joined the week before it was bought by eBay. So, and then I ended up leading the eBay PayPal integration from the PayPal side. So I did the first integration, checkout integration.
Wow. So I guess let's stick on that topic. Obviously, again, you've been at some prominent organizations. What do you now take as the lessons as you're building your startup from scratch? What are like the couple of keys that it's like a must have to make sure you implant in your organization?
Well, I think that one thing that we forget is how easy it is to have things slow down. And so what I really appreciated about working at Facebook was that that it felt like every day you're moving the needle, and even at scale, even when it's 66,000 people. And so, one of the things that I really value is that culture of like unblocking, the culture of delivering, the culture of moving things forward. And I feel like if everybody feels like they're moving the ball forward every day, the job is so much more fulfilling and impactful for your customers as well. And so a lot of what I do is really think about like, what am I doing today to move the ball forward, and have everyone on the team think about it the same way.
Tell me more about the unblocking, because that's an interesting concept I like. It's almost like playing defense, right? A little bit of to not let other stuff, the shiny objects, get in your way.
Well, I think part of it is that often people have to wait on other people to get things done. It's like a bucket brigade, right? In companies, especially in larger companies, it's like you have to wait for someone to do a handoff, to do the thing that you need to do to hand off to somebody else. And it becomes like these blockages. And if somebody goes on vacation, nothing gets done for 3 days because there's no one else to do handoffs. So one of the things that we do is we have a rule around like getting things unblocked. Do not be the blocker for someone else. If you are going on vacation, just hand off your responsibilities to someone else. Make sure people know so that they know to not wait on you. Those are the types of things culturally where we do not want to be holding anything back and slowing anything down.
Hmm. How do you handle that in like the interview process to make sure you get the right people that are doing those types of things that aren't going to be the blockers?
Well, so first we're really small. And so, when we started, we actually, rather than just hiring people, we have a contract to hire process, which is you come work with us 2, 3, 5 hours a week. You can stay at your existing job if you want and, work with us and just see what it's like in this pace because it's not for everybody. And so we've had people who continue to work at their existing jobs and then, or they're taking some time off and we say, hey, spend 5, 10 hours with and do that for a month or two and then you're going to be able to see like it's an extended interview process. It's not easy for everybody to be able to do that, but we try to make space for it so that people are actually seeing what a work trial looks like. We pay them for the work trial and that way they can opt in or opt out and we can opt in and opt out as well. I wish this were more easy and more common, but I know it's not easy to do. But how is that, right now, let's say we open a rec for something and suddenly like 2,000 people apply. How do we know who's going to be great for this? Right. And so instead we try to, we're hiring a sales lead and, we brought in the person, they're still at their existing job, but they're testing it out. Right. And they just worked with us they took a couple of days off of work, just like sat with us for a couple of days just to understand whether or not. And so you learn so much more doing because they're showing, not telling.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you're mentioning that, I'm kind of, and you mentioned you have 3 kids. I told you I had a teenager. Like I think about this with people just, they go, the kids go to college and we did this probably, right? As they go to college, you take a job instead of like, wait, do I really want to be an attorney? Maybe I should go audit this for a little bit. Do you ever bring any of that into the parenting side? Like, do you help your kids to say, hey, why don't you go work at this job just for a little bit?
That's what we encourage our kids to explore what the opportunities are, like take internships in places. So my son is studying accounting and data science. So he's doing this summer a data science internship. And then next summer, he's going to do an accounting internship. But what does that really look like on a day-to-day basis? And is this something that you're excited to do? My husband's an attorney, and he said, as a summer associate, it's you get to see what a firm looks like, but what you don't see is like the years of work it takes to get to the level it takes for you to be really productive. And so, but actually having hands-on experience helps you see what is it that I'm missing because law schools don't, produce lawyers. They produce people who understand the basics of the law, but law firms and these, when you become a lawyer, it's actually an apprenticeship job. You're actually learning on the job what good looks like,
Oh,
because they don't teach you to write great contracts. They show you what contracts are, what the obligations are, but they don't teach you the art of writing a great contract. And maybe with AI, that's less necessary. But the point is, on the day-to-day basis, judgment is the job, and that is an apprenticeship job.
yeah. Gosh, yeah, I think about like the change of again when we were younger and just kind of what the kids are going through right now in terms of how they're because like I mean, and I guess you see this just again just from your background and then obviously being in the forefront with your business. Like, how do you feel AI is going to impact this next generation? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I think that the first thing is that a lot of these apprenticeship jobs start with people who are training at the very, training on really basic things. And that training now can be done through AI because you're teaching people in a very structured way. And anything structured, you can do some part of it with AI. So maybe you train fewer people. What happens in 5 years when you don't have those people trained, right? And I think that that's going to be really dangerous. One of the things that we really need to think about is how do we actually help people in this transition where you're not doing entry level work as on the job training, but instead you're actually maybe the entry level role is managing some agents to do the job. But then you have to develop the judgment. And without the judgment, you can't manage the agents to do it because you can't give feedback. And so I do think that we as a society need to wrestle with the changes that this is going to happen over the next, 5, 10 years I think there are going to be lots of jobs still available, but it's the shape of those jobs are going to change. And I think getting in the first rung of the ladder is going to be harder than it used to be.
Yeah. Well, the use case, like you were talking about your husband as an attorney, like that's one of the gaps I've heard recently is like, great, you have all these entry level jobs that go away, but then what happens with like the experience? When do the experienced attorneys take over? Like at some point, do they just go away altogether?
Well, I was
Right?
listening to this podcast and somebody said boutique law firms only hire experienced people. It's the same thing like these kind of hedge funds only hire experienced investment bankers. If the the Goldmans, JP Morgans don't train investment bankers, you can't hire a fourth year out of school for a Citadel, right? And so it's like where does this go? And so I do think it's still required that we, but which company is going to want to take the cost of training someone else's senior staff?
Yeah.
And so it's like a weird dynamic that we have now where, the way you train is actually to do things hands on, but the things you do hands on are also agentifiable as well because they're routinized. That's how you teach people things. And so I think that that's going to be the paradox that we're going to have to figure out. But teaching that judgment and skill is the whole job because you can't just have fourth year associates and train bankers and accountants to do audit when you've never trained your junior staff.
Yeah. Do you think about again? Well, let's stick on the next generation here. Like when you think about education, and maybe I don't know what your kids' ages are, but like, do you think about like how and again AI just as a concept, right? Like how it's being used in elementary school or middle school, high school, even we'll go into college. Obviously, those are very different development areas and tech. But I feel like technology, like I know my son, probably your kid's the same. Like he's got his Chromebook and he carries it all around. But I know there's been some studies recently about how that's actually a detriment to have kids on those. So I'm just kind of worried. Like, do you think about the education system at all? And I don't know if you ruminate on that.
Well, so first, I think one of the things I've always told my kids is be a creator, not a consumer. If you want to be on your computer or your phone, I think the problem is that there's a lot of consumption. It's like mindless scrolling, watching videos. You're basically taking in information, but you're not producing anything. And so, but if you're a creator, you're creating something. So writing, essays, I read a column with my daughter. My son created a mini podcast for a topic that he is interested in. And so when you're a creator, suddenly you're looking at the world from a totally different perspective. It's not just you're mindlessly consuming, but you're thinking, well, who's my audience? What am I speaking about? You invite people, and suddenly you learn the skills of actually making something. And then you put it out there and you listen to critiques, you listen to feedback. Like, all of those things are put together. And when you create something, you put yourself out for criticism, but opportunity for you to explore and people react. When you're just consuming in an isolated way, you're actually not adding anything to the world.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've told the kids is you can have access to these devices, but only as part of that is to be a part of what's creating value in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And again, a lot of this comes down to the parenting and like because again, every kid is going to have their own like things they're ruminating on, thinking about. And it's like, how do you get them like? So how do you get them to say be a creator and have the confidence to do that? Right. That's kind of where I guess the rubber meets the road is like I don't know if a lot of parents even know how to help their kids become a creator because they're a consumer.
Yes.
They're not a creator, right?
And so I think having kids, it used to be like, your imagination runs wild, you go outside and you play. Nowadays kids are at home a lot. And, one of the things I encourage you is like send your kids outside, and then if you want them to create something, say, hey, show me what you want to do. Like, don't just, here's an hour or two you're wasting. Show me a business plan or show me a creation plan. Like, make a video. It doesn't have to be consumed by everybody. It could just be for your own enjoyment, but have something that you can hang your hat on where you can be proud of what you created, whatever it's art or writing or a video, like whatever your interest is. I think that just there's a huge difference between taking a photo and actually just consuming someone else's photo because you think about the lighting, you think about the angle, you think about the placement. When you just consume someone else's photo, you just look at it and then you scroll to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's cool about these, like I was saying with Claude Code and stuff. Like I was even having this conversation with my son last week about like go and play with it. I was like, just think of an idea, problem that you have, and he's still thinking about the problem, by the way. But he's like, but I was like, let's just go create something. Like use the tools. He obviously doesn't do coding or anything, but like use the tools. And again, to your point, like let your imagination run wild to kind of see where you can take it. And who cares if it never leaves your computer screen? So I
Yeah.
think there is an opportunity like that for everyone out there if they just take that chance.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that now with the tools, you can create something, from scratch and have it be, show it to people. But then you're getting feedback, you're iterating, you're learning skills of design, you're learning what product market fit is. Like, those are all things that are necessary in the world. Whereas just the consumption is, really kind of a dead end.
Do you have any fun like side projects you're building?
So I mean, the side project I started working on ended up turning into this company, so which is great. But like with the kids, I write a column with my daughter for a newsletter for a newspaper, As Them News. I write, my other daughter is the artist for my blog. I have a blog. I have tons of side projects actually. And then, we actually built a platform that allows companies to basically, we do enterprise workflow automation. We basically take backends and we help solve problems that you have within organizations and enterprises with AI software.
Hmm. Where did that idea come from? Was that from your past experiences or did it pop out of a conversation or?
Well, so I was taking this boot camp class, and then I went to the person who created the class. He's my co-founder, and I said, forget the class for a second. This platform is really powerful. What if we made it available and brought it into enterprises that don't have access to AI? If you kind of, you can use Cloud Code, but how do you host it? How do you secure it? And I think a lot of organizations without software engineers don't have the ability to actually rewrite their workflows, but they know that they have a need to do that. And so we actually work on how do we actually bring AI to these companies that don't have software engineers that help them, drive efficiency. There's like 20-30% of everyone's job, which is you wish you could automate away so you could focus on the things you care about. That's what we do. We come in and we talk to the team and we say, what is the 20-30% of the stuff that you wish you weren't doing? And then we help with building agents or building a workflow so that that's eliminated. And then you can focus on things like client service or negotiating with vendors and those types of things, which I think is things that only humans can do. And I worry that right now it's like AI is going to replace everybody. No, actually, humans are great at certain things. And so we have this model called dual intelligence. What if you bring AI to do the part that it's best at, but then you're freeing up humans to do the part that only they can do?
Yeah. Do you find like, are your current clients, are they like problem aware or are they like very like, do they not know they have a problem? Like they know, like, I wish I could automate this, but do they not like, you have to open it up and it's like, whoa, I didn't even think this could be done.
I think, I don't think when we first start conversations that they realize what is possible with AI. And so what we do is we educate them and we say, hey, look, what if we just, tell us about your set of problems. Let's not talk about the solution for a second. And a lot of them will say, well, I have a team of, 20 people over here doing this thing and it's not that efficient. And we say, okay, well, what if we could, take 50% of the workload off so that you could free up that team to do twice as much, basically. And they're like, oh, that'd be amazing. And then we talk through, we want to meet the team. We want to walk through like what it is that it would take to build this out. And so that's the kind of thing that we do is that we actually identify organizations piece by piece, rather than ripping and replacing everything they have. Let's actually pick the things that are the burning platform, the issue that you have that we can help solve. The challenge we have, right, you hear it's like MIT said 5% of AI experiments, ever go to production. Well, part of it is that, you're only, if you're not picking the right problems and you're trying to take on too much, it's going to fail. So instead we try to pick up specifically scoped problems. And then we say, okay, how do we automate that for this group of people only? So it's very narrow a problem, but then you see the ROI immediately and suddenly you want to do the next one and the next one, and the next one.
Yeah. Are you finding a lot of companies are still hesitant to adopt AI, like to give their hand? Basically, like I'm giving up all my, almost like control, really, right? Because the human's not oversight on it. I'm just kind of curious if you're dealing with that.
Well, so we actually do require human oversight. We believe in humans in the loop. Here's the challenge you have. It's okay. Imagine you have your OpenClaw running on a Mac Mini and it deletes all your email. Like
Yeah,
that's not that's not
that's
that's
not
not
good.
what you want to happen, right? Someone said that they deleted the entire database. Human oversight is super important in tools because we don't, you want to make sure that the AI is getting feedback. It gets better when you give it feedback. And so we require, as part of these flows, that people are giving a feedback, that they do the approvals, they do a spot check. Because then if there's a mistake, you can actually go back and audit it and actually figure out where things went wrong and fix the problem. The challenge is if you mindless, it's like people who just plug in something. I've seen this happen where like students will plug in something to ChatGPT, or people will write a cover letter and then they cut and paste even the top and the bottom and they
Yeah.
stick it in, so they don't even review it, right? I'm like, as my husband, who's a lawyer, uses a lot of these tools as well. He's like, AI is confidently incorrect 15% of the time.
Yeah.
And the problem is you don't know, and if you skip the human judgment step, you're wrong 15% of the time, right? And so instead, really like having human intelligence that's augmented by I think that's going to be the future.
Yeah. What I even love is the like again with building like this little app on the side and other stuff I use with Claude. Like I've even got to the point where it's messed up a few times where now I'll be like, when it's like, yep, ready, push this to the development or whatever. I'm like, are you sure? Do you want to double check? And then it like checks it and it's like, well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I missed this or whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did that
But
happen?
think about if we just let people land planes with that. Like there's been times where it says X, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's wrong. Here is an example, and they're like, no, 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 X, and I'm like, here's another example, and they say, oh yeah, you're right. But sometimes you have to correct it multiple times to get it right. And again, nothing is ever perfect. Humans are not perfect either. But I think judgment is super important, and building judgment into AI is really important too. You don't want it to blindly. So we actually require humans to double check it just to do that. You can get 80% done off the plate for one workflow, but you do want somebody to review it and double check it for sure.
Hmm. Are there any? So there's a lot of startup founders and folks trying to build businesses that'll listen to the podcast. Is there any specific use cases you've heard like recently? Like, hey, these are 2 or 3 areas you could look out for, almost like to give them the playbook of you should solve these problems that you might not even know exist. Like anything you'd point out.
Well, so I would say this, which is, we tend to go into large enterprises. I actually think that there's so many, every single day you would probably meet somebody who is going to run into an issue that founders could find. But you need to really deeply understand the problem and whether or not you can solve it. I think a lot of founders fall in love with the solution, not the problem. And so we're powering a class. So we're powering a class where part of it is where our platform is going to power this class at Duke. And one of the things that they're doing is the discovery process is way more than the building process. We're helping to power the building process, but often people build the wrong thing. And so, sure, it's like you're wasting your time. And so instead, a lot of that class is going to be, do you understand the problem? Do
Yeah.
you understand the design partners? Do you understand what product market fit is? Because often, it's you can build garbage if you have a garbage idea, but if you have a brilliant idea, then it's really about building quality behind it. And so really helping people hone in on understanding the design and solution process is going to be the most important thing.
So more because you can build anything really. It's more specificity helps you kind of hit the
Yes.
dart on the bullseye, I guess, the
Yes.
best way to say it. Yeah.
Yes.
So is there anything else like when you think of AI, if I gave you an open notepad to say, Brian, we absolutely have to talk about this. Is there anything top of mind for you that's maybe a valuable topic we haven't discussed or hit on?
Well, so I think there's a lot of AI doomerism, which is, but I think one of the things that's really important is that we understand what the impact on our society is going to be. And I think that it's good to have those conversations. But I actually believe that AI also makes so much things that were previously inaccessible, accessible to so many people. The amount of human intelligence that has built AI can also make it possible for people to access, tools that they never had before. And so I think that just like the internet opened up a lot of opportunities for, even just some really basic medical advice,
Yeah.
poison control, like, there's this like tons of things. I think we are just scratching the surface of what AI can do. But I worry that the idea that it's going to take over our jobs is causing people to sour on it before we've looked at some of the opportunities that will make our lives a lot better too, which is, how do we use AI to bring education to those who don't have access to it? How do we use AI to, maybe offer, advice? There was, people who, for example, there was this company recently. I met the founder, who was really focused on how do we actually do like AI coaching for people with mental health challenges, right? Because there are not enough therapists out there.
Yeah.
And so, and it's unaffordable for a lot of people. But at the same time, we're really scared that they'll, lead people astray. And so I think it's this push pull where what if we could double the access? But it also means that there's going to be some things, just like self-driving cars. There will be a child that's run over by a self-driving car.
Yeah.
And so we know that that's true. And yet accidents might go down by, 90%.
Right.
And so how do we weigh those things as a society? Because that is going to be one of the biggest challenges that we have is how do we weigh all the people that didn't get hit, by a car because humans were drunk or sleepy or, missed a sign. And so I don't know how this is going to play out, but I think it's important that we wrestle with this together as a society.
You bring up a really good point because it is, and maybe this is the sensationalized media at times, but like you hear like, oh yeah, so the self-driving car hit someone and got in an accident. But again, there's no talk of, oh, there was, whatever, how many 40,000 or I don't know how many deaths there are a year with car accidents, right? From actual human drivers. And I think there's this really, interesting intersect of like, when does it become not doomsday anymore, but actually, hey, there's a benefit here to society. And how do we look at that a little bit more in depth? Because you even brought up the therapy thing. I hadn't thought about that, but like, if you think there's unbelievable therapists out there, right? Top of the world. But that means there also has to be really bad therapists that are not good at their job, right? And then there's the median of everyone. So at what point does AI become maybe that at least median one where it's rather to use that than maybe even someone that's not going to give them good advice, Does
Or
that make
even
any sense?
access altogether. There are not enough therapists. I tried to get a therapy appointment for one of my kids. Actually, it took me a year and a half to get an in-person appointment. I was on so many waiting lists. And it was right after COVID, so it was a tough time for a lot of kids. And basically the answer was zero therapy or get somebody in person. Like that was it, right? And I'm like, there's many things in between, which is maybe it's a therapist assisted tool, or maybe I don't know what that was, but I just think that there's a lot of places where accessibility is really important and we have not thought through what is possible. What I don't want to do is, people just use the generic models and just say, hey, like let's chat. Like I actually think having thought through like here's a safe flow for people who it's monitored where you're flagging issues. Those are important and safety is important. But is it better to have something which is AI or is it better to have nothing? Which is, I think, the choice right now is for a lot of people, the answer is we have nothing or we have substandard tools. What if we build something that was, better? And what if, the other thing about self-driving cars is, there's people who drive and there's self-driving cars, but there's also accessibility. You're opening the door to so many people who can't drive. They have disabilities, they're older, and we often look at the downside without understanding that there's a commiserate upside as well.
Yeah. Well, and even think of the new introductions in the last, whatever, 15 years with phones, right? I mean, a lot of accidents from people on their phone, texting, whatever, like there's distractions. So there's another benefit of like the self-driving cars where that goes away potentially, So there's a lot of things, I guess, to weigh in the topic. I'm sure there'll be arguments for many years and, as we go on here. Deb, this has been phenomenal. Any final words, parting wisdom, anything you'd like to share? Maybe, sometimes I always like to maybe ask as a lasting impression, is there an action item? Being the Just Get Started podcast, it's about action. You talked about that earlier, right? Of taking action when you run into the obstacle. What action would you encourage people today to do to maybe get started, maybe using AI or just something in general?
Well, I encourage everyone to always be learning, right? Learn the next technology. So you don't have to use it every day. You don't have to be an expert in it. You don't have to code in it. But even understanding what is possible will help you be a more educated voter, a more educated consumer, a more educated employee as well. And I do think that the next generation of people who are hired in the workforce are going to be expected to be AI conversant and to be able to leverage the tools. And those who retool and gain that knowledge are going to be the most valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point to end on. Deb, where do you hang your hat the most? Is that LinkedIn, website? Like where would you point people to say
So I have
hello
a
to you?
Substack, deblue.substack, and then I also on LinkedIn, I post, every week or so my writings as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.